The evening sun painted the sky in soft golden shades. The great mansion of Mr. Richard, one of the most powerful billionaires in the city, stood tall and proud, its garden stretching like a sea of green carpets. Birds sang softly among the trees, fountains whispered their music, and the air smelled of roses and fresh-cut grass. The mansion looked like a world where only wealth and power lived. But that evening, something very unexpected was happening inside those walls. Mr. Richard was returning home earlier than usual. Normally, his days were swallowed by meetings, business trips, and endless calls with powerful people. But today, a headache had forced him to leave his office early. He wanted only silence, a cup of tea, and the comfort of his private garden. As his black car entered the driveway, he sighed, preparing himself for peace. Yet peace was the last thing waiting for him. When he stepped into the garden, he froze. His sharp eyes, trained to notice the smallest detail in business, caught sight of something that made his heartbeat slow down, then race again. Under the old oak tree, in the far corner of the garden, sat his little daughter, Emily. That was not surprising. Emily loved books, and she often carried them out to the garden. But what truly shocked him was not her presence. It was the girl sitting beside her. The girl was thin, her clothes old and torn. Her hair was messy, and her face carried the tired marks of a hard life. She did not belong to this place of gold and marble. She looked like she belonged to the cold streets outside the mansion gates. Yet there she was, sitting beside Emily, pointing at the book in her lap, her finger guiding Emily's eyes over the words. Emily was smiling. She was listening with all her heart, nodding, asking questions, and laughing at something the girl said. Emily's eyes, so often bored when her private tutors tried to teach her, were now shining with excitement. And the poor girl this homeless child was teaching her like she had been born for it. Mr. Richard's lips parted, but no words came out. A billionaire's daughter, being taught by a homeless girl? His world, built on control and order, suddenly felt shaken. How could this happen inside his own home? Who had let this stranger in? What if she was dangerous? His heart filled with anger, confusion, and curiosity all at once. He took a step forward, but then stopped. For a moment, he decided to stay hidden, to watch silently. Maybe he would understand more before revealing himself. His strong hands folded behind his back, his tall figure standing in the shadow of the marble pillar. His eyes never left the two girls. The homeless girl's voice was soft, yet clear. "See this word?" she asked Emily. "It looks difficult, but it's really not. Break it in small parts. Like this." She split the word slowly, her finger tracing the letters. Emily repeated after her, her small voice full of determination. When she got it right, the girl clapped her hands softly, and Emily laughed like bells ringing. Mr. Richard's chest tightened. His daughter's laugh was rare. She had everything: wealth, toys, tutors, the best schools, but still, she often looked lonely. Yet now, with this stranger, she looked alive, truly alive. Minutes passed. The sun slipped lower, painting shadows across the garden. Still, the two girls remained lost in their little world of books and lessons. The billionaire's anger began to fight with something else, an uncomfortable respect. The homeless girl did not look afraid of the book. She held it like a friend. She spoke with the calmness of a real teacher. There was intelligence in her eyes, and kindness too. But how did she come here? Why was she sitting in his private garden? And what would people say if they ever saw this? A billionaire's daughter, learning from a homeless child. It was something society would never understand. His reputation could be ruined in a moment. Whispers in the city would never end. Yet, as he thought of reputation, he also remembered his daughter's smile, so bright under the oak tree. His mind argued with itself. One part said, "Throw the girl out right now." Another part whispered, "Wait, see more. There is something here you don't know." Emily leaned forward and hugged the girl suddenly. "You make it so easy." "I finally understand this story," she said, her little voice full of happiness. The homeless girl smiled shyly, her eyes shining though her face looked tired. That simple smile carried more dignity than diamonds. Mr. Richard's throat tightened again. He had bought his daughter the most expensive teachers, yet none of them had managed to win her heart like this poor stranger had in just one afternoon. Was there some secret here? Or was this simply the truth, that sometimes knowledge does not wear rich clothes? He clenched his jaw. Enough was enough. He could not stay hidden forever. With heavy steps, he began walking toward them. Each step on the stone path felt louder than thunder. Emily looked up first. Her eyes widened with surprise, but then a smile spread across her face. "Daddy!" she shouted happily. The homeless girl's reaction was the opposite. Her body stiffened. Fear flashed across her eyes. She quickly closed the book, as if caught doing something wrong. Her thin hands trembled slightly and she lowered her head. She did not belong here, and she knew it. Mr. Richard stopped before them. His tall figure cast a long shadow over the two children. He looked at his daughter, then at the girl beside her. For a moment, silence ruled the garden. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. Emily's innocent eyes looked up at her father, full of trust. The homeless girl's eyes, half hidden, looked ready for rejection, maybe even punishment. He opened his mouth, his voice deep and commanding. But before he could say a single word, Emily spoke quickly. "Daddy, look. She is teaching me. She explains better than my tutors. I understand everything now." Her words hit him like a storm. Better than her tutors? Those tutors were the best money could buy. They had studied in famous universities, trained in modern teaching methods, and yet Emily had never said she truly learned from them. But now she was praising this poor girl. The billionaire's eyes turned to the homeless girl again. She was still quiet, still afraid. Her thin fingers held the book tightly, as if it was her only treasure. There was dignity in her silence, but also pain. Mr. Richard felt his chest grow heavy. Anger, confusion, and curiosity twisted together. His world of clear rules suddenly seemed messy. He could not understand how this moment had even begun. But he knew one thing for sure: the evening had changed everything. The sun finally touched the horizon, spreading deep orange light across the sky. In that light, the image was unforgettable. A rich man's daughter, smiling brightly, sitting beside a homeless girl who had given her more in 1 hour than wealth had given her in years. Mr. Richard's mind whispered again. What now? Throw her out, or let this moment grow? He stood still, the question burning in his heart, and the answer would not come so easily. And that was the shocking discovery, the one that would set everything in motion. A story no one in the city would ever forget. The night was slowly arriving, and the orange sky faded into deep blue. The mansion lights flickered on one by one, glowing like golden stars scattered across the wide garden. But inside Mr. Richard's chest, there was no peace. His heart was still heavy, his mind still storming. The image of his daughter, sitting happily with a poor homeless girl, would not leave his eyes. He stood silent for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the thin girl who sat nervously under the oak tree. She held the book as if it were a shield. Her shoulders were stiff, her head slightly bowed as though waiting for harsh words to strike her. Emily, however, looked calm and excited. Her little hands clung to the book and to her friend. She did not notice the dark storm rising in her father's eyes. Mr. Richard was not a man who easily showed emotions. In boardrooms, his face was always hard, his voice always certain, and his words always final. But now, he was not sure. He wanted to shout, to demand answers, to ask how this stranger had entered his private home. But at the same time, he wanted to understand. Something about the way his daughter had smiled earlier. Something about the way she had said, "She explains better than my tutors," had unsettled him. Questions burned inside his mind like fire. Who is this girl? How did she enter my home? What makes her so special that Emily prefers her over highly paid teachers? But the biggest question of all was harder. Why did Emily look so happy with her? Not with me, her own father, or the people I brought to her? The billionaire's eyes grew darker as he thought. His sharp gaze landed on the homeless girl's thin hands. Her fingers were rough, her nails broken, signs of a life filled with struggle. Her clothes were faded, almost colorless, and her shoes had holes. She looked fragile, but her eyes, though lowered, carried something else, a quiet strength, a light that poverty could not kill. Mr. Richard noticed it even, if he didn't want to. Emily broke the silence with her bright voice. "Daddy, do you want to sit with us?" She was just telling me how to read long words. "Look, I can do it now." She opened the book, eager to prove her progress. Her small lips shaped the letters slowly but correctly. Her voice was careful but confident. For a moment, pride softened Mr. Richard's face. His daughter's voice was steady, her mistakes fewer than before. But then his pride clashed with his anger. Shouldn't this progress have come from the expensive teachers I hired? How could a homeless girl give my daughter what they couldn't? The thought was almost insulting. He cleared his throat, his deep voice breaking the moment. "Emily," he said slowly, "who brought this girl here? Did you invite her?" Emily blinked. "No, Daddy. I saw her outside the gate yesterday. She was sitting near the fountain. She had a book in her hand. I asked her about it, and she told me the story. Today, I asked her if she would come again. She said yes." Emily smiled, proud of her discovery. As though she had found a secret treasure, Mr. Richard's eyes turned back to the homeless girl. She looked frozen, her lips pressed tightly together, fear clear in her body. She did not try to defend herself. She did not speak a word. It was Emily who spoke for her, Emily who protected her presence. He narrowed his eyes. The question in his heart grew sharper. What is it about this girl? Why does my daughter trust her so easily? He had always believed trust must be earned, built slowly with care. Yet Emily had given it freely to a stranger who owned nothing. Finally his deep voice came again, firm and cold. "What is your name, girl?" Her lips trembled before she whispered Sarah. Her voice was soft, almost too soft, like she was afraid her words would anger him. She did not look up. Her eyes stayed fixed on the ground. "Sarah," he repeated, testing the sound of it. "Do you know where you are? Do you know this is private property? No stranger is allowed to enter these gates without my permission." Sarah's small hands clutched the book tightly. For a moment, silence filled the air again. Then, with great effort, she whispered, "I am sorry, sir. I did not mean to disrespect. I only came because she asked me. I thought it was just for the book." Her words were simple, but there was honesty in them, honesty that stung Mr. Richard in a way he could not explain. Her apology was not coated with excuses. She had come because a child had asked her. Nothing more, nothing less. Emily quickly pulled at her father's sleeve. "Please, Daddy, don't be angry. She is kind. She makes learning fun. She helps me understand stories. Please let her stay." The billionaire's eyes shifted from his daughter's pleading face to Sarah's lowered head. Two very different worlds stood before him, one of gold and privilege, the other of dust and struggle. And yet, somehow, they had met here in his garden, united by a simple book. His mind was not at peace. Questions echoed inside him, louder and louder. Why does this poor girl know so much? Why does my daughter, who rejects every tutor, accept her so easily? Who is she, really? The weight of those questions pressed against him, and he knew he could not push them away. The answer would not come tonight, but he would find it. He had to. The night deepened. Stars appeared in the sky one by one. Mr. Richard looked at Sarah one last time, his eyes sharp, full of suspicion and curiosity. She still sat quietly, her hands on the book, her body ready to run if he ordered it. Emily held onto her arm, unwilling to let her go. Mr. Richard's lips tightened. He turned and walked back toward the mansion. But in his eyes remained the burning question that would not leave him. Who is this girl, and why does she matter so much to my daughter? The mansion grew quieter as the night settled in. The stars above looked down like silent witnesses, and the soft rustle of the wind passed through the tall trees of the garden. But inside Mr. Richard's mind there was no calm. The storm of questions from earlier had not left him. Instead, they grew stronger. Who was Sarah? Why did Emily trust her? And why did her presence disturb him so much? Mr. Richard walked through the long hallway of the mansion, his polished shoes striking the marble floor with sharp sounds. Each step carried the weight of his thoughts. Servants lowered their heads respectfully as he passed, but none dared to ask why their master looked so troubled. His face was stern, his eyes distant, his lips pressed into a thin line. He carried the look of a man who had seen something that shook his entire belief in order. At last, stopped at the large window that overlooked the garden. From there he could still see Emily and Sarah sitting under the oak tree. The garden lights shone softly on their small figures. Emily was laughing again, her little hands moving as she spoke. Sarah, still shy but gentle, listened carefully, guiding Emily's words whenever she stumbled. The sight made his chest tighten once more. That laugh, the one he so rarely heard, rang again and again, but it was not for him. It was for this homeless girl. He clenched his fists. It felt like a silent challenge. A confrontation had already begun, even if no one had spoken yet. He, the father, the billionaire, the man who ruled entire companies, was being quietly defeated by a girl who owned nothing. And she had done it not with money or power, but with patience and knowledge. The thought burned him, yet fascinated him. Finally, he turned sharply and walked back into the garden. His tall figure appeared once more on the stone path. The sound of his steps made Emily turn her head quickly, her eyes bright with excitement. "Daddy, you came back," she shouted happily. Sarah's body stiffened again. She looked down immediately, her fingers tightening around the book. Her breathing grew shallow, as though she was preparing herself for whatever punishment would come. She had lived long enough on the streets to know that people like him did not accept. People like her, Mr. Richard stopped before them. For a long moment, silence ruled the garden. The soft fountain behind them seemed louder than usual. Emily looked from her father to her new friend, sensing the tension, but not fully understanding it. Sarah kept her head low, waiting. At last his deep voice broke the silence. "Sarah," he said, his tone heavy, "look at me." Slowly, Sarah lifted her eyes. They were dark, filled with both fear and dignity. She did not speak, but she obeyed. Their gazes met for the first time, and for a brief second, felt like two worlds had collided, one built on wealth and power, the other on struggle and survival. "Do you know who I am?" Mr. Richard asked. Sarah nodded slightly. "Yes, sir. You are Mr. Richard. Everyone in the city knows you." Her voice was quiet but steady. "Then you must also know this is my home," he continued. "You must know that no one enters without permission. Yet here you are, sitting in my garden, teaching my daughter as if you belong here. Tell me, why should I allow this?" The question hung in the air like a sword. Emily's eyes grew wide. "Daddy, please," she began, but he raised his hand gently to stop her. Sarah's lips trembled. She lowered her eyes again, her fingers pressing the edges of the book. For a moment, Mr. Richard thought she would stay silent. But then, with a small breath, she spoke. "Because she asked me," she said softly. "I only came because she wanted me to. I did not force myself inside. I never wanted to cause harm. She just wanted to learn." Her words were simple, yet they carried weight. Mr. Richard studied her face carefully. There was no sign of trickery, no cleverness to gain something, only honesty and a quiet strength. Still, he did not let his expression soften. "Do you think you can teach her better than the tutors I pay for?" he asked, his voice sharp, almost mocking. Sarah shook her head quickly. "No, sir. I have no degrees, no certificates. I only know what I learned from books. I just wanted to share it with her. That is all." Emily suddenly stood up, holding the book close to her chest. Her little voice broke the tension. "But Daddy, she does teach better. I understand when she explains. I like learning with her. Please don't be angry. Please let her stay." Her words stabbed deeper than Sarah's. Mr. Richard looked at his daughter, her small face glowing with both fear and determination. Emily rarely spoke with such fire. But tonight, she was ready to defend her new friend against her own father. For a moment, no one moved. The confrontation had no shouting, no raised hands, yet it was powerful. It was a battle of silence, of eyes, of presence, of truth. Mr. Richard, the billionaire, stood against a homeless girl who had nothing but a book in her hand. In between them stood Emily, the bridge that connected their worlds. Mr. Richard finally exhaled, his shoulders dropping slightly. He looked at Sarah again. I don't know who you really are, but I will find out. Until then, remember this is not your place. You are here only because my daughter wants you here. Nothing more. Sarah nodded, accepting his words quietly. Her eyes, though lowered, did not lose their calm light. Emily, relieved that her father had not sent her friend away immediately, smiled faintly and hugged Sarah's arm. Thank you, Daddy, she whispered, though he did not reply. As the night deepened, the confrontation ended not with a clear victory, but with an uneasy truce. The questions in Mr. Richard's eyes had not been answered. The suspicion in his heart had not been silenced. But for now, Sarah remained. And the silent battle between wealth and poverty, pride and truth, had only just begun. The morning sun rose softly over the mansion, spreading its light across the wide lawns and polished marble walls. The golden beams touched every corner of the garden, but inside the heart of Mr. Richard, shadows still lingered. He had not slept well that night. The silent confrontation from the evening before replayed again and again in his mind, the homeless girl's lowered eyes, his daughter's brave defense, and his own unanswered questions. When dawn broke, Mr. Richard found himself restless. He left his grand bedroom and walked into the hall, where paintings of ancestors hung like silent judges. Their eyes seemed to ask him the very questions he had been asking himself. What kind of father allows a stranger to teach his child? What danger hides in this girl's presence? Yet another part of him whispered something different. Why did Emily smile so brightly with her? Why could money not buy that same happiness? By the time he entered the garden, Emily was already there. She sat under the same oak tree, her hair shining in the morning light, her small hands clutching a book. And beside her, once again, was Sarah, the homeless girl. Her clothes still bore the same signs of hardship, but her posture remained calm and respectful. Her hands moved across the page as she guided Emily with patience. Mr. Richard's footsteps made the gravel crunch. Emily turned quickly, her face lighting up. Daddy, she called, waving the book. Come here. You have to see this. Sarah stiffened, lowering her eyes again. The memory of the previous night was still fresh. She sat frozen, unsure whether she would be scolded again or told to leave. But Emily's excitement did not leave space for fear. She jumped to her feet and ran to her father, holding the book high as if it were a treasure. Look, Emily said, her voice glowing with pride. I can read this whole page now. Sarah showed me. I didn't get stuck at all. Mr. Richard looked down at the book, then at his daughter's shining eyes. For a moment, he felt the smallest crack appear in the walls of his stern heart, but he held his voice firm. Emily, I have given you the best tutors in this city. Why do you need her? He pointed slightly toward Sarah, his tone sharp. Emily's smile faded a little, but then she took a deep breath. Her little face grew serious, more serious than her age. She looked up into her father's eyes and said words he never expected. Because, Daddy, she listens to me. The garden went silent. Even the birds seemed to pause their morning songs. Mr. Richard blinked, not sure if he had heard correctly. What did you say? He asked, his voice softer now, almost uncertain. Emily held the book close to her chest. She listens. When I don't understand, she doesn't get angry. She doesn't hurry me. She tells me again, slowly, until I get it. My tutors just talk, and when I ask questions, they look bored. But she makes me feel smart. She makes me believe I can do it. Her words cut deeper than any insult could. Mr. Richard felt his throat tighten. He had spent millions to give his daughter the best education, but here she stood, telling him that the one who truly made her feel capable was a girl with no home, no title, and no degree. He turned to Sarah. She was still sitting on the grass. Silent and nervous, her fingers locked together. She had not defended herself. Emily's words had done it for her. There was no arrogance in her face, no pride, only humility and quiet strength. Mr. Richard's eyes lingered on her longer this time. He searched for something, maybe a sign of trickery, maybe a hint that she was pretending, but all he saw was honesty. Honesty, and something he rarely saw in the tutors he hired. Patience. Emily tugged at his sleeve, pulling his attention back. "Daddy, don't send her away. Please. I like learning now. I feel happy when she teaches me." "Isn't that what you wanted?" Her little voice shook slightly, but her words were steady. Mr. Richard inhaled slowly. His chest felt heavy. He looked from his daughter's pleading face to Sarah's quiet figure. A battle raged inside him between pride and reason, between suspicion and the simple truth standing before him. Finally he spoke, his voice lower than before. "Emily, I only want what is best for you. But sometimes what looks good may not be safe. You don't understand the dangers of trusting strangers." Emily shook her head, her eyes shining with tears. "But she is not dangerous. She is kind. Can't you see it, Daddy? I know you are strong, but sometimes strong people don't see what gentle people can do." Her words struck him again. From the mouth of a child came wisdom that made him pause. Sarah still said nothing, but her silence spoke volumes. She was not fighting to prove herself. She let Emily's truth speak for her. Mr. Richard turned slowly back to the girl under the oak tree. Their eyes met again. This time, he saw something different. Fear, yes, but also courage. She had not run away, though she easily could have. She had stayed, facing his sharp eyes with quiet dignity. The confrontation from last night was not over. But today, it carried a new shape. It was no longer only about control or reputation. It was about something deeper, a father realizing that his daughter had found light in the unlikeliest place. For the first time, Mr. Richard did not know what to say. His lips parted, but no words came. The silence stretched long, heavy, filled with emotions that even he could not fully understand. And in that silence, Emily's unexpected words hung in the air. Powerful and undeniable, "She listens to me." The day had just begun, but Mr. Richard knew this truth would not leave him. Not today, not ever. The day moved forward with a quiet tension that no one could ignore. The mansion, usually alive with busy servants and strict order, felt strangely different. Emily's words from that morning, "because she listens to me," still echoed in Mr. Richard's ears. They repeated again and again, louder than the ticking of the grand clock in the hallway, louder than the sound of his phone buzzing with business calls. For the first time in years, work did not hold his full attention. His daughter's words had shaken him deeply. At noon, he returned to the garden. He told himself it was only to check that the stranger had not crossed limits, but the truth was, curiosity pulled him back. He found them again under the oak tree. Emily sat with a smile on her face, her legs folded neatly, her eyes following Sarah's hand as she explained something in the book. Sarah's voice was soft, calm, but it carried an unusual clarity. Even from where he stood, Mr. Richard could hear the difference. Emily's small hand shot up suddenly. Wait, she giggled. "I think I can read this myself now." She bent over the page, her little lips moving slowly. She read each word carefully, her voice filled with determination. When she reached the end, she looked up at Sarah with eyes full of pride. "Did I do it right?" Sarah smiled gently, nodding. "Perfect. You read every word. See? You can do it." Emily clapped her hands happily. "I couldn't do this before. My tutors just gave me long lessons, but I never understood. You make it simple. I feel like I can really learn." Mr. Richard's chest tightened again. He leaned against the marble pillar, watching silently. He had hired the best tutors money could buy, people with shining degrees and polished manners. Yet none of them had given Emily this kind of joy. Why, what was this homeless girl's secret? She had no certificates, no professional background, and yet she had unlocked something in his daughter that others could not. His eyes narrowed as he studied Sarah more closely. She pointed to the book, explaining patiently. She didn't rush Emily. She didn't scold her for mistakes. Instead, she repeated things slowly, using small examples Emily could understand. There was a natural gift in the way she spoke, a hidden talent shining quietly. It was not something taught in classrooms. It was something born deep within her. Emily suddenly turned and saw her father standing nearby. "Daddy, come listen," she called excitedly. She ran to him, tugging at his hand. "Please, sit with us. Sarah is showing me how to break big words. You have to hear it. It's amazing." Mr. Richard hesitated. A part of him resisted, pride holding him back. But Emily's bright face and eager eyes were impossible to refuse. Slowly, he followed her and sat on the bench near the oak tree. His powerful presence filled the space, and Sarah lowered her eyes at once, her body tensing. "Go on, Emily," urged her friend. "Show Daddy how you explained it to me." Sarah looked at Mr. Richard nervously. His eyes were sharp, but there was something else in them now, not just suspicion, but curiosity. She swallowed and opened the book again. "It's simple," she said softly. "Big words are not as scary as they look. If you divide them into small parts, each part has meaning. When you put them together, the word becomes clear." She gave an example, her finger tracing the letters slowly. Emily repeated after her, and within seconds, the difficult word became easy. Mr. Richard's eyebrows lifted slightly. It was true her method was clear, effective, and simple. Something in the way she explained carried the wisdom of someone who had practiced for years. "Where did you learn this?" Mr. Richard asked suddenly, his deep voice breaking the flow. Sarah froze. Her lips parted, but no sound came at first. Emily looked at her encouragingly. Finally, Sarah spoke in a low voice. "I used to spend time in the public library. They didn't ask me to pay if I sat quietly. I read whatever books I could find. Over time, I learned. Reading was my escape, my comfort. I just remembered how I taught myself." Her confession was simple, but it hit Mr. Richard with force. This girl, who had nothing, had built knowledge out of scraps of opportunity. No teachers, no wealth, just books and determination. He felt something stir inside him, something he had not felt in years. Respect. Emily looked up at her father with shining eyes. "See, Daddy? She's special. She makes learning beautiful." Mr. Richard did not reply at once. He kept his gaze on Sarah. She lowered her head again, her hands folding the book tightly against her chest. She looked fragile, yet there was strength hidden deep inside her. That strength had given his daughter something priceless, confidence. The silence stretched, heavy, but meaningful. For the first time, Mr. Richard did not see Sarah only as a homeless girl. He saw her as someone with a gift, a hidden talent shining through her simple words. And though he would not admit it aloud, a part of him wondered, was this girl meant to cross paths with his daughter for a reason? He rose from the bench slowly, his voice deep and controlled. "Emily, finish your lesson. I have matters to think about." He turned and walked back toward the mansion, his thoughts swirling. He had seen something today that unsettled him more than any business rival ever could. A poor girl, nothing but a book in her hands, had shown him the power of a hidden talent that no money could buy. And deep inside, though he would never say it, he knew this was only the beginning of something far greater. The mansion that afternoon felt different, as though the air itself carried a secret. Servants moved quietly through the halls, whispering in corners. They had seen the stranger in the garden again. The girl with torn clothes and weary eyes they could not hide their surprise. For years, the mansion had been a place of strict order where no outsider could enter without permission. Yet now, a homeless girl sat beneath the oak tree, reading with the billionaire's daughter as though she belonged. By evening, the whispers grew louder. In the grand kitchen, two maids exchanged worried glances as they cleaned silver trays. "Did you see her again today?" one asked in a hushed tone. "The little one's tutor, they call her. But she's no tutor. She's a girl from the street." The other maid frowned. "It's dangerous. What if she's pretending? What if she brings trouble?" Upstairs, in the drawing room, even the butler raised an eyebrow as he served tea. "Sir," he said carefully to Mr. Richard, "the staff is unsettled. They speak of the girl. They don't understand why she is allowed in the garden." Mr. Richard's sharp eyes lifted from his untouched tea. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of command. "Tell them to mind their duties. What happens in this house is my decision." The butler bowed quickly, but inside, his heart remained uneasy. He had never seen his employer so uncertain before. Something about the girl was shifting the balance in the mansion. Meanwhile, in her room, Emily hugged her favorite stuffed bear tightly. She had heard the whispers, too. The servants had spoken in low voices, but children always hear more than adults expect. She felt a pang of fear. What if Daddy sent Sarah away because of them? The thought made her heart ache. She didn't want her new friend to disappear. Not now, not ever. Out in the garden, Sarah sat alone after Emily had gone to her lessons indoors. The wind rustled through the leaves of the oak tree, and she stared at the book still in her hands. She knew the whispers had begun. She could feel the heavy eyes of the servants whenever she walked past. She was used to such looks on the streets. People often stared at her with suspicion or pity. But here, in this grand place, the stares felt sharper, more dangerous. She wondered if she would be forced to leave soon, as the sun dipped low. Mr. Richard stepped onto the balcony of his study, overlooking the garden. His gaze fell on Sarah, sitting quietly with the book. She looked small against the vastness of the mansion grounds, yet there was something unshakable in the way she sat. She did not look like a thief or a liar. She looked like someone who carried secrets inside secrets built not on danger, but on pain and resilience. Still, the voices of doubt echoed in his ears. The staff's whispers, society's judgments, his own fears all clashed within him. Was he making a mistake by letting this girl near his daughter? Or was he about to discover something that would change everything he thought he knew? That night, the mansion was quiet, but no one truly rested. Emily dreamed of her friend, worried about losing her. Sarah stayed awake beneath the stars, clutching the book like a lifeline. And Mr. Richard lay in his grand bed, staring at the ceiling. The whispers swirling in his mind. For the first time in years, the mansion felt alive with more than wealth and power. It pulsed with mystery, with questions, with the beginning of something none of them could yet name. And in the shadows of the night, one truth became clear. The whispers had only just begun. Morning came with a heavy stillness inside the mansion. Mr. Richard sat at the long dining table, his breakfast untouched. The golden chandelier above glimmered, but he hardly noticed. His mind was troubled, carrying the weight of unanswered questions. Trust was something he guarded more fiercely than wealth. Trust had built his empire, and betrayal had almost destroyed it once before. That wound still lingered, hidden under his sharp suit and cold expression, and now, sitting quietly in his garden, was a girl who tested that trust again. Emily entered the dining hall. Her steps light, her face glowing, she greeted her father with a smile. "Good morning, Daddy. Can Sarah come inside today? It's too hot outside. She could help me with my reading in the library." Mr. Richard's fork paused in midair. The library, his sanctuary, the most private room in the mansion. To let a stranger inside was unthinkable. He placed the fork down slowly, his eyes narrowing. "Emily," he said firmly, "you do not understand. Trust is not something to give away so easily. This girl is still a stranger." Emily tilted her head, her small voice filled with innocence but also quiet determination. "But she's my friend. I trust her." The words hit him harder than expected. Trust his daughter could give it so easily. He, a man of great power, struggled with it every day. He leaned back in his chair, his mind torn between fear and the bright honesty in Emily's eyes. Later that morning, Sarah stood nervously near the garden gate. She clutched the worn book Emily had given her the day before. Her heart pounded as she wondered if today would be the last day she was welcome here. The whispers of the servants had grown sharper. Their eyes followed her every move. She felt like an intruder walking on forbidden ground. Emily came running toward her, smiling wide. "Come on, Sarah. I want to show you the library. It's full of books. You'll love it." She grabbed Sarah's hand eagerly, tugging her toward the mansion. Sarah froze at the threshold. The tall doors of polished wood towered above her. She had seen places like this only from a distance. To step inside felt impossible. Her voice trembled. I don't think I should go in." Emily frowned. "Why not? You like books? Daddy won't be mad if you're with me." But Sarah's fear wasn't of Mr. Richard's anger. It was of belonging. She had lived too long on the outside, where doors like this stayed shut. She feared that stepping inside would remind her of everything she had lost. Her fingers tightened on the book. "I don't belong here," she whispered. Just then, Mr. Richard appeared at the top of the staircase. His presence filled the hall, his tall figure casting a long shadow. His eyes fell on Sarah, and the silence grew thick. Emily's hand still held Sarah's tightly, as though she refused to let her go. "Daddy," Emily said quickly, "please, let her come in. She won't hurt anything. I promise. She just wants to see the books." Mr. Richard's gaze shifted between his daughter's pleading face and the girl standing frozen at the door. He saw fear in Sarah's eyes, but also a quiet strength that reminded him of battles he himself had fought long ago. He inhaled slowly, then spoke in a measured voice. "Emily, books are not toys, and the library is not a playground. If she steps inside, she must respect what that room means to me. Do you understand?" Emily nodded eagerly, tugging Sarah's hand again. Sarah's lips parted, but no words came. She looked at Mr. Richard, unsure if this was permission or warning. His gaze was firm, almost cold, but something softer hid beneath it, a challenge. Perhaps, or a test. With trembling steps, Sarah crossed the threshold. The grand hall stretched before her, filled with golden light and silent portraits. Her heart raced. She felt every whisper of the servants behind her, every doubt pressing on her shoulders. But Emily's small hand squeezed hers, giving her courage. For the first time, Sarah entered not as a beggar on the street, but as someone trusted if only a little inside the world of a billionaire, and though Mr. Richard said nothing more, his eyes followed her every step. Trust had been questioned that day, and though fragile, a door had been opened. Whether it would lead to acceptance or betrayal, none of them yet knew. The heavy wooden doors of the library creaked open. Emily pulled Sarah inside with excitement. Sarah's breath caught the moment she stepped into the room. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. Towering shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, filled with books of every size and color. The faint smell of old paper and polished wood filled the air. A soft golden glow came from the tall windows, making the room feel like a palace of knowledge. Sarah's heart pounded. She had spent years sneaking into public libraries, where she was often told to leave if she stayed too long. But here, inside this grand mansion, stood a library bigger than anything she had. She stayed too long. But here, inside this grand mansion, stood a library bigger than anything she had imagined. Her eyes glistened, not from greed, but from awe. She whispered under her breath, "It's beautiful." Emily grinned, tugging at her hand. "Come on. I'll show you my favorite corner." She led Sarah toward a round table near the fireplace. Books were scattered there, half open from Emily's attempts to read. Sarah touched one gently, her fingers trembling as though it were a treasure too fragile to hold. From the doorway, Mr. Richard stood watching. His sharp eyes studied every move. He didn't step in, but his presence lingered like a shadow. He wanted to see how Sarah behaved in this room, his sanctuary, his pride. If she made one wrong move, he was ready to send her out forever. Emily pulled out a large book with golden letters on the cover. "I never understand this one," she said, frowning. "It has so many big words." She pushed it toward Sarah. "Can you help me with it?" Sarah hesitated. The book looked expensive, more valuable than anything she had ever touched. She glanced at the doorway, where Mr. Richard's figure stood like a guard. Taking a deep breath, she opened the book carefully. Her voice shook at first, but then grew steadier. "We can make the words smaller," she explained, pointing to the syllables. "Every word has parts, and if we break them, they won't scare you anymore." Emily leaned closer, her eyes shining with curiosity. Together, they broke down the words. Soon, Emily was reading full sentences, her little voice growing stronger with each line. "I did it," she cried, looking up at Sarah. "I really did it." Sarah smiled softly, pride glowing in her eyes. "See? You only needed to believe you could." In the doorway, Mr. Richard's expression shifted. He felt something stir inside a memory, sharp and painful. He remembered his own childhood, struggling with lessons while tutors scolded him. He had learned not through kindness, but through pressure and fear. Seeing his daughter learn with joy was something he had never experienced himself. It unsettled him, yet it also moved him. He stepped further into the room, his footsteps echoing on the marble floor. Emily turned and beamed. "Daddy, did you see? Sarah helped me read the hard words." Sarah froze, her hands tightening around the book. Mr. Richard's gaze landed on her, steady and unreadable. "You seem to know your way with books," he said slowly. "For someone with no education, that is unusual." Sarah lowered her head. Her voice was quiet, but each word carried truth. "Books were my teachers. I had nothing else. I read whatever I could find. Sometimes, when I was hungry, I forgot it for a while. But when I could, I always came back to books. They gave me hope." The room fell silent. Emily looked at her father, waiting for his response. Mr. Richard's chest tightened, though his face remained stern. He wanted to question her further, but something in her words stopped him. Hope. It was a word he had not felt in a long time. He glanced at his daughter. She was smiling again, brighter than he had seen in months. He couldn't deny what he saw. The girl brought light into Emily's world. Yet the risk remained. Trust was fragile, and secrets often hid behind gentle faces. "You may help her with reading," he said finally, his tone low. "But remember, one wrong step, and you will not set foot in this house again." Sarah nodded quickly, her hand shaking. "I understand, sir." Emily hugged her father's arm, her little face glowing with joy. "Thank you, Daddy. Thank you." Mr. Richard said nothing more. He turned toward the shelves, running his fingers across the spines of the books. But in his mind, questions grew louder. Who was this girl really? What past had shaped her? And why did fate bring her here into his daughter's life? As the fire crackled softly in the library, Sarah continued guiding Emily through the pages. She spoke gently, but inside, her own heart carried secrets she dared not share. Secrets that could change everything, if ever revealed. And in that grand, silent library, the billionaire realized something both dangerous and undeniable. This homeless girl was no ordinary stranger. She carried a hidden story, and soon would have to uncover it. The days that followed carried a strange stillness inside the mansion. Sarah's presence in the library became a quiet routine. Each morning, Emily rushed to meet her, eager to continue reading. Her laughter echoed through the grand halls, lighter and happier than ever before. To a father's heart, those sounds should have been enough. And yet, for Mr. Richard, unease lingered like a shadow that refused to fade. At first, he told himself it was only caution. He was a man who had built his empire by questioning everything, by trusting no one until they proved themselves beyond doubt. But the more he watched Sarah, the more questions formed in his mind. Who was she, really? Why did someone with such patience and hidden talent end up on the streets? And most of all, what did she want from his daughter? One evening, Mr. Richard sat in his study, the flickering firelight casting long shadows across the walls. His trusted advisor, Mr. Bennet, stood across from him, waiting. "You've been quiet lately, sir," Bennet said carefully. "Is it because of the girl?" Mr. Richard's jaw tightened. "The staff talks too much. They see a stranger and assume danger. I'm not interested in gossip, but—" He paused, swirling the glass in his hand. A father cannot ignore when someone unknown steps so close to his child. Mr. Bennet nodded slowly. "Do you want me to make inquiries? Find out who she is? Where she came from?" The thought tempted him. With a single command, he could uncover Sarah's past. Yet something inside held him back. If he dug too quickly, he might destroy whatever fragile trust Emily had built with the girl. He shook his head. "Not yet. I will watch her myself. Sometimes truth reveals itself when you are patient." Meanwhile, Sarah felt the weight of eyes upon her. Every time she stepped through the gates, she sensed the servants' stares. Their whispers followed her like shadows. She tried to focus on Emily, on the joy of teaching, but deep down fear gnawed at her. She knew it was only a matter of time before someone asked questions she wasn't ready to answer. That night, lying on the thin mattress she called a bed in the small shelter she sometimes visited, Sarah clutched Emily's book to her chest. She closed her eyes, but sleep did not come easily. If they find out the truth about me, will they still let me stay? The thought made her stomach twist with dread. The next morning, as the sun spilled across the garden, Emily bounded happily toward the library. But Sarah walked slower, her steps heavy. She was beginning to doubt herself. Was she giving Emily hope, or was she only building a fragile dream that could shatter at any moment? When they reached the library, Emily sat at the table with her usual grin. "Today, I want to read the hardest story here," she declared proudly. "Because if I can do that, I can read anything." Sarah smiled faintly, but inside, her doubts grew louder. She guided Emily patiently, but her hands trembled as she turned the pages. Mr. Richard watched from a distance, his sharp eyes noticing every detail, the hesitation in Sarah's movements, the flicker of worry across her face. For the first time, he saw not only talent in her, but fear. Fear of being discovered later that day, when Emily ran off to fetch her drawing book. Mr. Richard stepped closer. His voice was low, steady, but laced with warning. "You're hiding something." Sarah's breath caught. She turned to him, her face pale. I don't understand what you mean, sir." His gaze was unrelenting. "You speak with knowledge beyond your years. You teach as if you were trained, yet you claim you learned it all alone. A man like me learns to read faces, girl. And your face tells me there is more to your story." Sarah's lips parted, but no words came. Her chest rose and fell quickly, her heart thundering in her ears. Before she could answer, Emily came running back, holding her book. "Daddy, Sarah!" "Look what I drew." The tension broke, hidden behind Emily's laughter. Sarah forced a smile, helping the girl with her drawing, but inside her fear burned hotter. Mr. Richard had seen too much. His doubts had begun. She knew it was only a matter of time before the truth she had buried would demand to be revealed, and in his eyes, the billionaire carried a silent promise. "I will find out who you are." The morning sun painted the mansion's walls in soft gold. Yet inside, the atmosphere felt fragile, like glass that could shatter with a single wrong move. Sarah walked through the garden gates, clutching the straps of her worn bag. Her eyes lowered. The memory of Mr. Richard's piercing words the day before still echoed in her mind. "You're hiding something." Her steps slowed as she reached the library door. For a moment, she considered turning back. Maybe it was safer to stay away, to vanish before the truth unraveled on its own. But then she remembered Emily's bright smile, the way the little girl's eyes sparkled with excitement each time they read together. She couldn't abandon her. Not yet. Emily's laughter rang out from inside the library. The sound drew Sarah forward, washing away her hesitation. She pushed open the heavy door, and there was Emily sitting cross-legged on the carpet, surrounded by open books. "Sarah," she cried happily, "look, I picked out 3 stories today. I want to read them all with you." Sarah knelt beside her, hiding her unease behind a soft smile. 3? That's a lot. But if you're ready, we'll do it together. As the lesson began, Emily's little voice stumbled through the long sentences, her tongue twisting over the hard words. Sarah guided her gently, breaking each word into smaller pieces, her patience never wavering. And when Emily succeeded, her laughter filled the room again, bright and triumphant. From the corner, Mr. Richard watched silently. His doubts had not faded, but neither could he ignore the joy blooming in his daughter's eyes. Emily had struggled for months with her reading, but under Sarah's guidance, she was blossoming. It stirred something in him, a quiet conflict he did not want to name. When Emily left the room to fetch her sketchbook, Mr. Richard spoke. His tone was low, measured but heavy with meaning. "Why do you stay, girl? You could leave. You don't owe us anything." Sarah's hands tightened around the book she held. "Because she needs me," she whispered. "And maybe I need her too." His gaze sharpened. Need can be dangerous. It makes people do things they shouldn't. Their eyes met, and for a moment, neither looked away. Sarah's chest rose and fell, her heart racing under the weight of his suspicion. She wanted to speak, to explain, but the truth was a tangled knot she couldn't untie. Finally, she lowered her eyes. "I only wish to help her, sir. Nothing more." Mr. Richard didn't respond. He turned toward the shelves, his silence carrying more weight than words. But inside, his doubts grew sharper. Sarah's presence wasn't simple. It wasn't chance. Something tied her here, something she wasn't ready to reveal. Later that afternoon, as Emily and Sarah worked in the garden, the bond between them grew stronger. Emily showed her flowers, laughed as they chased butterflies, and even pressed a daisy into Sarah's hand. "Now you can't leave," she said innocently. "This flower means you belong here." Sarah's throat tightened. She smiled for Emily's sake, but deep down her heart ached. She wanted to belong, but reality whispered otherwise. She was still an outsider, still a girl carrying secrets that could end everything. Meanwhile, the staff watched with uneasy eyes. Whispers spread faster than wildfire. Why does the master allow her to stay? She must be after something. What if she's dangerous? The servants' suspicion grew each day, and though Emily's laughter filled the halls, tension crept into every corner of the mansion. That night, Sarah lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling of the shelter where she slept. She turned the daisy over in her fingers, Emily's words replaying in her mind, "You belong here." A fragile hope bloomed inside her chest. But with it came fear. Hope was dangerous. It could break her more than hunger ever had. Back in the mansion, Mr. Richard stood by his window, looking out at the night sky. His reflection in the glass looked weary, torn between doubt and something he couldn't quite name. He thought of his daughter's smile, of the way she clung to Sarah's hand. And though he tried to deny it, one truth haunted him. Sarah had become part of Emily's world, and perhaps whether he liked it or not, part of his own. The bond between the girl and his daughter was growing. Fragile, delicate, but undeniable. And deep inside, Mr. Richard knew fragile bonds are the hardest to break, but the easiest to destroy. He clenched his fist and whispered into the night. The following morning was quiet in the mansion. Too quiet. The usual rhythm of Emily's laughter and Sarah's gentle voice was missing as Sarah lingered outside the gates, her steps hesitant. She held the daisy Emily had given her the day before, now slightly wilted, and stared at it as if it were the only thing tying her to this new world. Her heart was torn between fear and hope, but she finally pushed herself forward. Knowing Emily would be waiting inside, Mr. Richard sat at the breakfast table with Emily. Watching her chatter excitedly about reading with Sarah again, his face remained unreadable, but his mind churned. He had spent much of the night revisiting fragments of his own past. Memories he thought he had buried forever, memories of growing up without comfort, of facing harsh teachers who crushed rather than guided. The homeless girl's patience with Emily haunted him, echoing the tenderness he had once wished for himself. When Sarah finally entered, Emily ran to her and hugged her tightly. "You came. I thought maybe you wouldn't." Sarah smiled faintly, brushing the girl's hair back. "I'll always come, Emily." But her voice carried a hidden tremor, as if she was trying to convince herself of the same thing. Mr. Richard studied her carefully. The girl's clothes were neat but clearly worn, her shoes scuffed, her eyes tired from restless nights. She was no ordinary wanderer. Something in her carried weight like a shadow from the past she dared not reveal. Later that day, Emily begged Sarah to read in the garden. They sat under the shade of a great oak tree, with books spread across their laps. Emily's excitement grew as she managed longer sentences, her progress remarkable. Sarah encouraged her, each word gentle. But every now and then, her gaze wandered, her eyes distant. As if pulled into memories too heavy to share, Mr. Richard approached silently, his presence strong, yet unspoken. He stood behind them, watching Sarah's fingers trace the words on the page. He caught the way her eyes lingered on certain phrases, as though she wasn't just teaching but reliving something long buried. "Where did you learn this?" he asked suddenly. Sarah jumped slightly, her hands clutching the book. I told you, sir. From books I found, from libraries, from no." His voice was sharper now, cutting through the air. "This is not the knowledge of someone who picked scraps of paper off the street. The way you teach, the words you use. It is the mark of someone trained, someone educated. Emily looked up at her father, confused. Daddy, Sarah's just helping me. Mr. Richards' gaze remained locked on Sarah. His eyes narrowed as though trying to peel away her layers. People do not end up homeless by accident. There is always a story. And yours, girl, is written all over your face. Sarah's chest tightened. For a moment she thought of speaking the truth, of revealing the secret she carried like a heavy chain, but fear silenced her. Her eyes lowered. I don't want to trouble you with my past, sir. It doesn't matter anymore. Mr. Richards' jaw clenched. He wanted to press her, to demand answers, but Emily's small hand tugged at his sleeve. Daddy, please. Sarah makes me happy. Don't be angry with her. The billionaire's heart twisted. His daughter's plea held power over him, softening the storm inside. He exhaled slowly, choosing silence instead of confrontation. But inside, his doubts grew darker. Her refusal to speak only confirmed his suspicion. Sarah's past held shadows, and those shadows were dangerous. That night, Sarah sat alone by the river near the shelter, staring at the water's surface as it reflected the moonlight. Memories she fought so hard to bury clawed back into her mind, memories of a family she once had, of dreams she had lost, of choices that had led her here. She whispered to herself, if they knew, if he knew, they would never let me stay. Back in the mansion, Mr. Richards stood by his daughter's bedside, watching her sleep peacefully with her books still scattered nearby. He touched the cover of one, tracing the title with his finger. His mind circled back to Sarah, to the mystery surrounding her. He couldn't shake the feeling that her story and his own were bound in ways he did not yet understand. The shadows of Sarah's past were creeping closer, pressing against the walls of silence she had built, and Mr. Richard knew it was only a matter of time before those shadows stepped into the light. For now, the fragile world held together, but beneath it, secrets waited, secrets powerful enough to change everything. The days grew heavier with unspoken tension. The mansion remained alive with Emily's laughter, but beneath the surface, suspicion, whispers. And secrets wound themselves tighter like a rope ready to snap. Sarah could feel the change. Every step she took inside the mansion felt heavier. Every glance from the servants sharper. Every word from Mr. Richard weighted with meaning. One afternoon, Emily insisted they read in the library. Sarah followed, though her chest felt tight. As Emily's small voice sounded through the room, stumbling and then rising with newfound strength, Sarah smiled faintly. But her heart wasn't in the lesson today. Her eyes darted toward the door, half expecting Mr. Richard to appear at any moment. And he did. He entered silently, his tall figure framed by the golden light of the windows. His gaze was steady, unreadable, but Sarah felt the force of it strike her like a cold wind. Emily looked up happily. Daddy, listen. I can read almost the whole page without help now. Mr. Richard nodded with faint approval, though his eyes never left Sarah. That is good, Emily. Very good. Why don't you go fetch your drawing things? I would like to speak with Sarah. The request made Sarah's pulse race. Emily, oblivious to the tension, skipped out, leaving Sarah alone with the man whose suspicion had grown sharper with each passing day. The silence between them stretched. Finally, Mr. Richard spoke, his voice low but edged with authority. I've been patient, girl. I've watched you, listened to you. I've given you space to speak, but you remain silent. No more. Tell me who you are. Sarah's throat tightened. Her fingers trembled as they clutched the edge of the book on the table. I've told you what I can. I'm just a girl who lost her way, who found comfort in books. No. His voice cut through hers, sharp as a blade. He stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. Do not insult me with half-truths. The way you speak, the way you teach, it is not the skill of a street girl. You carry the bearing of someone who once belonged elsewhere, someone who has lived another life. What are you hiding? Sarah's chest heaved. She wanted to speak the truth, to lay bare the weight she carried every night, but fear gripped her throat like iron. If she revealed too much, She might lose Emily, and Emily was the only light she had left. "I can't," Sarah whispered, her eyes glistening. "Please, sir, don't ask me." Mr. Richards' expression hardened. His patience was crumbling, his doubts turning into frustration. "Then you leave me no choice. If you will not tell me, I will find out myself. And when I do, if I discover even one lie, even one danger to my daughter, you will never set foot here again." Tears burned in Sarah's eyes, but she forced herself to stand tall, though her body shook. "I have never wished harm to Emily. She is the only reason I stay. She is the reason I breathe some days. Please believe that, even if you believe nothing else." Mr. Richards stared at her, his eyes narrowing as though trying to pierce through her soul. But before he could respond, Emily's cheerful voice rang out from the hallway. "I'm back." The tension snapped. Hidden behind smiles, neither of them truly felt. Emily entered, hugging Sarah's arm and showing her drawings. "Look what I made. It's us, me, you, and Daddy." Sarah's heart broke at the innocence of the child, who had unknowingly bound them together. She hugged Emily tightly, hiding her trembling hands. Mr. Richards said nothing, but his silence spoke volumes. He was nearing his breaking point. That night, Sarah walked back to the shelter with heavy steps. She sat by the window, clutching Emily's drawing in her lap. Her tears spilled silently as she whispered to the night, "How much longer can I hide?" In the mansion, Mr. Richards stood in his study, staring into the fire. His jaw was tight, his mind racing. "She is hiding something. Something that could break us all. I will find the truth no matter the cost." The breaking point was drawing near. The fragile bond between trust and secrecy was fraying, and soon, someone would shatter. The mansion seemed restless, as though the walls themselves had begun to whisper secrets. For days, the tension between Sarah and Mr. Richard had grown heavier. He no longer hid his suspicion, and Sarah no longer pretended not to notice. The only one who remained untouched by the storm was Emily, still laughing, still clinging to the bond she had built with Sarah. On this particular evening, the air was sharp and cold. The family gathered in the grand dining hall. Emily chattered about her lessons, her voice bright and full of excitement. Sarah sat quietly beside her, answering softly when spoken to. Mr. Richard, however, remained silent, his gaze fixed on Sarah with a weight she could hardly bear. Finally, when Emily ran off to fetch a book she wanted to show them, Mr. Richard spoke. His tone was calm, but there was no mistaking the steel beneath it. "I had inquiries made."
Sarah froze.
Her heart slammed against her ribs. Slowly she looked up, her lips parting, but no words came. Mr. Richard's eyes narrowed. "I know now that you were not always on the streets. You once belonged to a home, to a life very different from what you claim. And that life ended in tragedy." Sarah's breath caught. Her hands shook under the table. She wanted to deny it, but she could see in his eyes that denial would be useless. He knew something, perhaps not everything, but enough to unravel the lies she had built. Why hide it? He demanded, his voice dropping lower. Why pretend to be less than what you are? Unless you fear what the truth will cost you. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes, her chest rising and falling in quick, shallow breaths. For so long she had carried her secret in silence, believing it safer to bury the past. But now, under his unrelenting gaze, the weight felt unbearable. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "Because my past destroyed everything I loved." Mr. Richard's jaw tightened, but he did not interrupt. He waited. Sarah's eyes stared at the table, her words spilling like water breaking through a dam. "I was not always homeless. I had a family. A father who worked hard, a mother who dreamed for me, a little brother who followed me everywhere. We weren't rich, but we had love. I studied. I dreamed of being a teacher, of giving children what I had been given, hope." She swallowed hard, her voice trembling. And then, the fire came. Her body shook as the memories burned fresh in her mind. It was late. We woke to smoke, to flames swallowing everything. I tried to pull them out, but her voice broke, tears streaming down her cheeks. I couldn't save them. I watched everything turn to ash. When it was over, there was nothing left. No home, no family. Only me. And after that, the streets became my world. The room fell silent, heavy with the weight of her confession. Mr. Richard's face remained stern, but inside his heart stirred. For the first time, he saw not just a mysterious girl, but a survivor carrying scars too deep to see. Sarah wiped at her tears, though they kept falling. I never told anyone. People on the streets don't care for your story. They care only for survival. But when Emily looked at me, when she held my hand and asked me to teach her, for the first time since the fire, I felt like I could breathe again. Her voice cracked, but she forced herself to continue. I hid my past because I thought you'd throw me out if you knew. Because I thought you'd see me as broken, cursed. But all I ever wanted was to give Emily what I once dreamed of giving, to teach, to give hope. That's all I have left to offer. When she finished, silence filled the hall. Mr. Richard's expression was unreadable, but his hands clenched tightly on the table revealed the storm within him. He had demanded the truth, and now he had it. Yet the truth was far heavier than he had imagined. Emily came running back, her book clutched in her arms, her eyes bright. She stopped when she saw Sarah's tears. "Sarah, why are you crying?" Sarah quickly wiped her cheeks, forcing a smile. "It's nothing, sweet one. Just an old story." Emily frowned and hugged her tightly. "Don't cry. You're here with me now." Mr. Richard looked at them both, his daughter, innocent and full of trust, and the girl who carried shadows but also light. His doubts had not vanished, but something new stirred in him, respect. Sarah had unveiled her truth, not to gain pity, but to explain her silence. And though the scars of her past were deep, he could not deny the strength it took to carry them. That night, as Sarah lay in her shelter, she felt strangely lighter, as if confessing had loosened chains around her heart. Yet fear lingered. Would he still allow her near Emily? Or had she sealed her own fate? In his study, Mr. Richard stared into the fire, her words echoing in his mind. A fire, a family lost, a dream of teaching. He clenched his fist. The truth had been unveiled. But with it came a new burden, deciding whether this broken girl could remain part of his daughter's world. The truth was out. But the story was far from over. The mansion felt different after Sarah's confession. It was quieter, though not in sound. The servants still bustled. Emily still laughed, but in the atmosphere. There was a stillness that came from secrets finally spoken, from truths no longer hidden. Yet instead of relief, Sarah felt a fragile uncertainty. The weight of her past had been revealed, but now she stood exposed, waiting to see whether she would be cast out or allowed to stay. Emily clung to her as tightly as ever, as though nothing had changed. In Emily's eyes, Sarah was still the gentle teacher, the storyteller, the one who brought warmth to her lonely world. But Mr. Richard's gaze told a different story. He watched Sarah with a sharpness that had softened but not vanished. He no longer looked at her with suspicion alone, but with something more complicated, a mixture of doubt, curiosity, and an emotion Sarah couldn't quite name. That evening, Emily insisted on another lesson in the library. Sarah guided her gently through a book, her voice calm and steady despite the storm inside her. Emily leaned against her, absorbed in the story, while Mr. Richard sat silently nearby. His presence was a weight Sarah couldn't ignore. She felt his eyes on her with every word she spoke, every gesture she made. At last, when Emily grew drowsy and Sarah tucked her into bed, Mr. Richard lingered in the hallway. Sarah sensed he was waiting, and her heart pounded as she stepped into the dim light. "You told me the truth," he said at last, his tone measured. "But truth alone doesn't erase doubts. You've suffered? Yes. But suffering doesn't guarantee innocence." Sarah's chest tightened. "I never claimed innocence, sir. I only spoke what was real," studied her face, searching for any sign of deception. "And yet, you hide even now. There are still things you haven't said?" Sarah lowered her gaze, her hands twisting together. "Some truths are harder to bear than others. Some truths don't belong in every ear." His eyes narrowed slightly, but instead of pressing, he said, "I will not force you again. But understand this, I am a father before anything else." Emily's safety is all that matters to me. If you give me reason, even the smallest, to believe you endanger her, you will be gone." Sarah nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "I would never harm her. She's the only light I've known since my family." Her words faltered, but she forced them out. "I would protect her with my life." Mr. Richard said nothing more, but his eyes lingered on her, softer now, though still guarded. Then he turned and walked away, leaving Sarah trembling in the hallway. The following days were a delicate balance. Sarah poured herself into Emily's lessons with renewed devotion. She taught her letters and numbers, weaving stories of hope and courage into every lesson. Emily blossomed under her care, her confidence growing, her laughter filling the mansion with light. But the bond between Sarah and Mr. Richard remained fragile, suspended between doubt and hope. Sometimes she caught him watching her with quiet intensity, as though trying to reconcile the broken girl before him with the strength she carried. Other times, his silence felt cold, distant, reminding her that she was still a guest in a world that was not hers. One evening, Emily fell asleep in Sarah's arms during a lesson. Mr. Richard entered quietly, his eyes softening at the sight. For a moment, Sarah thought she saw a flicker of something in him: trust, perhaps, or even gratitude. But it vanished as quickly as it came. "You care for her," he said quietly. Sarah looked up, startled. "More than I can ever say." He nodded slowly, then said, "Perhaps. That is enough. For now." Those words stayed with Sarah long after he left the room. They were not acceptance, not yet. But they were not rejection either. They were something in between, an acknowledgement that, despite the doubts, hope remained. That night, Sarah lay in her small cot at the shelter. She held Emily's latest drawing close to her chest. It was another picture of the three of them, Emily in the center. Her hand in Sarah's, her other hand in her father's. The simplicity of it brought tears to Sarah's eyes. To Emily, there was no question, no suspicion, no past too heavy to carry. To Emily, they were already a family, Sarah whispered into the darkness. Maybe one day, she won't be the only one who sees it. In his study, Mr. Richard sat staring into the fire, Emily's laughter echoing faintly in his mind. He thought of Sarah's tears, of her trembling confession, of the way she shielded Emily as though the child were her own. Doubt still shadowed his heart, but for the first time, hope flickered beside it, between doubt and hope. A fragile bond continued to grow, one that could break at any moment, or transform into something neither of them had expected. The days moved slowly, like the careful ticking of a clock that knew one wrong move would shatter its rhythm. Sarah felt each hour in the mansion stretch longer than the last. Emily's lessons grew brighter, her laughter warmer. Yet the shadow between Sarah and Mr. Richard lingered, sometimes faint, sometimes heavy, but always there. It was a strange existence, walking along the edge of trust. Some moments felt almost safe. Emily would run to Sarah with open arms, and Mr. Richard would watch from the doorway, his face unreadable, but no longer as cold. Other moments, his sharp gaze would cut into her like a silent accusation, reminding her that doubt had not left it, merely waited. One afternoon, Emily tugged Sarah into the garden. The air was crisp, the leaves whispering in the soft breeze. Sarah sat on the stone bench while Emily skipped about, humming to herself. Mr. Richard stood at a distance, speaking briefly with a servant, but his eyes flicked to Sarah often. She felt the weight of his presence even when his back was turned. "Sarah," Emily said suddenly, plopping onto the bench beside her, "do you ever wish you had a family?" Sarah's breath caught. The question pierced deeper than Emily could ever know. She forced a smile, though her eyes glistened. "I did once, little one. I had a family once. And sometimes, yes, I still wish." Emily tilted her head curiously. "But you have us now, don't you?" Sarah's heart trembled at the innocence of the words. She brushed Emily's hair back tenderly. "Yes, I have you." At that moment, Mr. Richard approached, his footsteps firm against the gravel. "Emily, your lesson time is over. Go wash up." Emily bounded off happily, leaving Sarah alone with him once more. The air thickened between them. Mr. Richard studied her for a long moment before speaking. "She sees you as family," he said quietly. Sarah's throat tightened. "I know, and I would never betray that trust." His eyes darkened. "But you understand why I hesitate. My daughter's heart is fragile. If you ever leave, if you ever vanish the way the rest of the world has for her, it will wound her deeply." Tears stung Sarah's eyes. "I don't want to leave her. She saved me as much as I ever helped her." Her voice faltered, but she pressed on. "I care for her more than I thought I could care for anyone again." For the first time, something flickered in his gaze, something beyond suspicion. "And what of me?" The question hung in the air like thunder. Sarah's chest heaved. She didn't know how to answer. Did he mean it as a challenge, or was there something softer beneath it? She lowered her gaze, whispering, "I only wish for your trust. Nothing more." His jaw tightened, as though restraining words he dared not speak. Then, with a short nod, he turned and walked back toward the mansion, leaving Sarah trembling in the garden. That night, sleep eluded her. She sat by the shelter's window, Emily's latest drawing clutched to her chest. This one showed Sarah and Emily holding hands, with Mr. Richard just behind them, his hand resting on both their shoulders. It was simple, childlike, but it said everything. To Emily, there was no edge of trust, no suspicion, no fear. There was only a family. Sarah wept softly, whispering into the night. If only it were so simple. Meanwhile, Mr. Richard sat alone in his study, the fire casting long shadows across the walls. He thought of Sarah's trembling voice, her tears, her confession of a past that would have broken most. He thought of Emily's laughter, brighter now than it had ever been. Because of the girl, he still doubted. She hides something still, he told himself. But perhaps what she hides is not danger. But pain. The edge of trust was thin, fragile, and treacherous. One wrong step, and all could fall apart. But as he sat in silence, staring into the flames, Mr. Richard realized he was no longer sure whether he wanted Sarah Goner, whether he feared losing her just as much as Emily did. The story had not yet reached its breaking point. But both Sarah and Mr. Richard knew one choice. One truth could tip them off the edge forever. The mansion had grown into a place of contradictions for Sarah. It was at once a sanctuary and a battlefield, a place where she felt both belonging and rejection, where Emily's love warmed her heart and Mr. Richard's doubts chilled it. Each day she remained. The line between hope and despair blurred further. The tension reached its breaking point on a stormy evening. Rain lashed against the windows, the sky dark and restless. Emily had fallen asleep early after a long day of lessons and games. Sarah tucked her in gently, pressing a kiss to her forehead before stepping quietly into the dimly lit hallway. Her footsteps echoed softly as she made her way toward the main hall. Unaware that Mr. Richard was waiting, he stood near the grand fireplace, his tall frame outlined by the glow of the flames. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes burned with the weight of questions long unasked. Sarah stopped, her body tense, her breath catching in her throat. "Sarah," he said, his voice low but firm, "we need to speak." Her heart pounded. "Yes, sir." He turned toward her fully, his gaze piercing. "You've changed this house. You've changed Emily. She is happier than I've ever seen her. And I cannot deny it is because of you." Sarah's chest tightened, but she said nothing, afraid of what was coming. "But," he continued, his voice hardening, "you are still a mystery. Even with your confession, I sense there is more. Something you hold back." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She had known this moment would come, yet she wasn't ready. "I've told you all I can bear to speak. My past, it's nothing but ashes and sorrow. What more could you want from me?" "I want truth," he said sharply, stepping closer. "Not half-truths, not pieces. The whole of it. Because without it, I cannot decide whether to let you stay or send you away for good." Her knees trembled. The firelight flickered across her face, revealing the torment in her eyes. "If I tell you everything, if I give you the last of my truth, you might hate me." His jaw tightened. "Then let me decide that." But no more silence. The storm outside roared louder, thunder shaking the windows as Sarah's tears finally spilled. The fire that took my family? It wasn't an accident. Mr. Richard froze, his breath catching. What do you mean? Sarah's voice cracked. It was set. Someone wanted my father Ghani, stood against men who sought to cheat and steal from others. He refused to bend, and they burned us for it. My parents died because of it. My brother too. And I lived. But living meant running, hiding, carrying the guilt that I couldn't save them. Her sobs filled the hall, raw and broken. That's why I never speak of it. Because every time I do, I feel the flames all over again. And I fear. I fear that anyone who comes close to me will be burned too.
For a long moment,
Silence hung heavy between them. Mr. Richard's face shifted, the hardness softening into something Sarah had never seen before. Pain. Yes, but also deep, unspoken compassion. He stepped forward, slowly, until he stood before her. His hand hesitated in the air, then finally rested gently on her shoulder. You've carried this alone for too long. Sarah looked up, startled by the warmth in his touch. I didn't want to burden anyone. I didn't want Emily to see me as broken. She doesn't, he said firmly. She sees you as someone who gives her joy, who makes her feel safe. And perhaps I have been blind. Blind to what you have endured, blind to what you have given despite it. Her tears fell faster, her heart aching with relief and fear all at once. So, will you cast me out? His gaze softened, his voice low, but steady. No, not tonight. Perhaps not ever. Because the truth, Sarah, is that you have given my daughter something I could not give her alone. And I do not wish to lose that. I do not wish to lose you. Her breath caught, her heart slamming in her chest. She searched his face, trying to believe his words. You mean that? He nodded, his hands still resting on her shoulder. For the first time, I am certain of it. In that moment, the storm outside seemed too quiet, though the rain still fell. Sarah stood trembling, her tears shining in the firelight. Mr. Richard's eyes held hers. No longer cold, no longer distant. Something had shifted, something fragile, yet undeniable. When Emily awoke the next morning, she found Sarah and her father sitting together by the fire, speaking softly. There was no anger, no suspicion. No suspicion, only a quiet understanding that something between them had changed. Emily ran to them with a laugh, throwing her arms around them both. Now we're really a family, she declared. Sarah and Mr. Richard exchanged a glance over the child's head. Neither spoke, but their silence was no longer heavy with doubt. It was full of something new, something neither had dared to imagine. The hearts that had clashed in suspicion and sorrow had begun to collide in another way, through trust, compassion, and perhaps the faintest spark of love. But even as hope bloomed, Sarah knew her past was not done with her, and Mr. Richard knew that trust, once given, would soon be tested. For when hearts collide, the impact can either shatter or forge something unbreakable.